righty. Make sure we're not buffering. Give us a few seconds. All righty. Okay. Well, welcome everyone to the Trauma Informed Community Care Conversation. Look, I am broadcasting live at Holy Grounds Coffee House in Cartersville, Georgia. This amazing background is so dope. Don't y'all love it? It's amazing. So if you're ever in the Cartersville, Georgia area, stop by Holy Grounds Coffee House. It's amazing. So if you hear coffee grinds in the background and all this amazing conversation, it's a community conversation. So
Yes,
just
it is.
understand that right off the top. My name is Chai, like the tea, Mathias Reed, Master of Mending, holistic health practitioner, breakthrough, and endurance strategist. And I'm a cycle breaker.
Yes, you are.
And I am so excited to be having this amazing conversation with Pepper Joy. Look, I got to know Pepper Joy by a podcast. I was listening to a trauma informed care podcast and got to know Pepper's amazing story. Pepper is a certified trauma recovery coach at the supervisor level, the highest level of training in this field specifically. She is a speaker and welcome to come and facilitate workshops for you and seminars and conferences. She does this globally, which I'm so excited to be partnering with her. She's also an instructor with the International Association of Trauma Recovery Coaching. In Pepper's free time, she's published and written Rest. She's going to tell us a little bit about that, the restorative response therapy. She also creates community events and fairs that are trauma informed and alchemy centered. Pepper, which she did not mention in her bio, is a wife and a mother, and she lives in an amazing part of the world that I cannot wait to visit. Pepper, welcome to the conversation, and thank you for being willing just to jump in here and have this conversation with me today. I think it's really going to help a lot of people.
Yes, thank you for having me, Chai. I'm excited to
Yeah.
be here.
Yeah.
And I love that you are in a community space, and I'm sitting in my home, which is my small community space right now. So, yes.
Yes. Amen. Well, I'm so excited again to have this conversation because Um, as many people know, if this is your first time getting to know me, Chai like the tea, I'm a cycle breaker. And everywhere that I go, I advocate for breaking generational cycles. I also like to say that I'm a generational healer as well, because it's one thing to break a cycle, it's another thing to facilitate healing, right? And
Yes.
so, one of the main reasons why trauma informed care is such not just a buzzword to me, but it's such a passion for me right now is because it seems that everywhere that I've gone over the last 3 years, people have been impacted by some type of trauma, whether it's just through relational trauma in their interpersonal relationships, whether it's community trauma, whether it's just through life trauma that has never been resolved from their childhood, right? Not only that, me being a mom and a grandmother, I'm like, you know what, we really need to dig in more to figure out
Right.
how we can break this cycle of generational trauma so that we can raise healthy, whole children, right?
Yes.
This is the
Yes.
space that I'm in. So tell me a little bit about your why you became a trauma informed care specialist, and why this conversation is so important to you.
Right. Well, I started out, I grew up with childhood trauma. I've also been trafficked as an adult, and I really came to the place in my healing journey where I was seeing therapists, I was talking to counselors, and I was on the medication route, and I just really felt like I was trauma bonding with
Mm,
my healing process, and that didn't feel like progress. And so
mm,
I um I was on Twitter one night, and I noticed this hashtag called sex abuse chat. And so
mm,
I hopped on, I'm checking it out, and I'm like, they're telling their story. They're telling the truth, and they are
mhm,
without shame, without judgment. And I plugged into this little community right away. And I
mhm,
shared a little bit about my story. And then the founder of the International Association of Trauma Recovery Coaching, Bobby Parrish, actually reached out to me, and she was like, I could help you. I could coach you." So she coached me. She started coaching me, and it was one of the first relationships outside of my marriage that was safe for me. And
Nice.
I'd grown up in a church community that I really believed in. I was really passionate about. But what I found was when I started having questions and when I started living life in ways that they didn't agree with, there wasn't room for that. And so I eventually found myself exiled from my community, and and I placed no judgment on anybody in that space because I understand now. I have an understanding now that I didn't then about wounding and how it works. And so um, I've been studying for years. I've got my own lived experience with trauma. And I would say that, um, especially in my marriage, so I'm married to a Black man, and I've learned a lot about, um, and not to say that I understand it from any kind of lived experience, but I've learned a lot about how generational trauma shows up for
Mm,
everybody. And he really helped me see that, like, there are things that he struggles with that he's never had experience with in his life, but there's triggers or these activations that still come up for him because of his heritage being a Black American. And so
mm,
I started examining that, and like, if that's something that he goes through, where does that show up for me? And I had to like check my privilege, right? And get into like, I really do have things that I didn't even realize I was inflicting harm on others and just
mm,
living as who I am in the world. And it's because I had unhealed wounds.
mm,
So I got on my journey, started doing the work, went to the association, and I really started healing. I was able to get off medication. I wasn't being diagnosed with things that sounded like this is a lifelong doomsday process. There was a kind of deliverance in that. And
mm,
so um, I've learned about how trauma imprints itself on our DNA.
mm,
And I've also learned how in my life there were certain things I did in my life in living it that I didn't recognize were ways I thought I was honoring my heritage. Um, for instance, I could talk about money, I could talk about all these things that have been struggles for me in my life, but suffice to say that it was showing up in my life the wounding of my ancestors that they both had endured and inflicted. And
mm,
I didn't want to be one who inflicted trauma, but I also know that when we are in our wounding, we're blind to how we're doing that. And so
mhm,
I wanted to create community, and I wanted to be a part of community that was moving forward and having discussions with the purpose of understanding each other, not judging each other, not saying that's not the right way or what have you. So fast forward, got my certifications. I wrote my theory, restorative response system theory, REST. And it really speaks to this thing that we're talking about today, community care, this conversation we get to start,
mhm,
so that it can be had on a more global level. Someone needs to start this conversation. Self-care has been this very sexy topic forever, right? And that's
mm,
kind of been the hot button thing. As a mother, as I look at my child and I think about the ways that he's carrying the DNA of trauma I've endured, I if it's in us to have that in our DNA, surely it's in us to heal that. It's in our DNA to
mhm,
also heal that, to restore, to repair, to be what we were called to be, what we were designed to be in this world as creators and co-creators and human beings and worshipers and whatever it is that we define ourselves by. So my why is that the secret should be out, that
mhm.
you're capable of experiencing trauma. You are also capable of healing that trauma, whatever it is. Whatever.
Mhm. Yes, ma'am. I so love that. I so love that. And like I said before, it wasn't enough for me to just say that I was a cycle breaker because what started to happen is as my daughters left the nest and became young
Mhm.
adults, they started having experiences that
Oof.
began to mirror some of my experiences. And
Yeah.
it was almost as if I was like, oh my God, what is happening? I'm a cycle breaker. Why is this happening to them?
Yeah.
I felt like
Yeah.
I didn't have all the information. I felt like I had a piece
Right.
of it, but I didn't have
Right.
all of it. And
Right.
so I began to do my own homework and research to figure out why is my daughter having these same exact experiences that I had? And I've already declared that I'm the cycle breaker. And
Right.
that's when I began to learn about how trauma is passed down in the DNA
That's
to
right.
our children. right?
Yes.
And I was just like, okay, now how do I help her heal, right? Well,
Yeah.
the first thing I had to do is I had to heal, right? And I
Right.
had to get educated and become aware of what she's currently experiencing, and then pray for her that she would come to a place of being ready to heal. Because a
Mm,
big part of this conversation is no matter how much we want it for others, they have to
yeah,
be ready to heal themselves.
absolutely. They are free agents and their autonomy matters. Yep.
Absolutely. And so this is so good. And I'm glad we're having this conversation. I'm glad that we're really digging in because not only is it helping me to really navigate through this next phase of life, this community healing space, but also to really be able to impart not only to our children and our grandchildren that you don't have to stay stuck in generational cycles,
That's
that
right.
generational cycles can be broken. It can be broken,
Yes.
right? So, how do you identify whether or not you are stuck in a generational cycle or whether or not you have experienced trauma? Because you may not
Right.
have had trauma like I had. A lot of people know
Right.
my testimony and my story. They know your testimony, they know your story. But some people, like, I don't have trauma.
Right.
How do you really identify what that looks like in your life?
Right. Well, I think the first thing is to destigmatize the word trauma.
Hmm.
It's so shamed. It's so like, ooh, that's like you're broken, right? There's this
Hmm.
idea that if we have trauma, we're broken. And the truth is that trauma is a life experience, and you're not going to get out of
Hmm.
this life without it. And
Hmm.
so it's a catalyst. It's telling us something. It's telling us something about ourselves and something about the world around us, and maybe a lot more than just something, but a lot of things. So
Hmm.
the idea that if you have trauma, your brain is broken permanently is a myth
Hmm.
I definitely want to help bust in communities. But also as a community, like for example, where I grew up in the church, and it wasn't until I was an adult that I realized like things weren't reciprocal. And so that was a major wound for me, and I think about other survivors in the space, and I think about, if you're feeling exiled by your community, if you feel like you don't belong in the spaces where you occupy, uh, those are signs that maybe there's something there to just look into. And what's trauma for you might not be trauma for me. Maybe scraping my knee is something that's a major trauma for me, and where you're like, get up and walk it off, and well, let's keep going. And so this calls into question our judgment of being able to look at somebody and say, oh, you have trauma. Only
Hmm.
you can know if you have trauma, and it's if you identify with it or not, right?
Hmm.
So with childhood trauma, it's hard to not identify as our trauma.
Hmm.
Whereas
Hmm.
adults, trauma is usually triggered by something we went through as a child that we
Hmm.
didn't know was traumatic to us. We just thought it was imprinted on us. And
Hmm.
so, so yeah, there's a few it's very individual. I would say it's definitely very individual, and it's a different experience for everybody. And
Hmm.
learning to have compassion for ourselves as well as others is going to be the key to helping us identify um, trauma and how to help each other in that.
Hmm. Hmm. When you talk about the traumas that we experience as children, what I've discovered is a lot of people have so suppressed those traumas that they no longer remember,
Right.
or if they've blocked it out of their mind because your brain has a way of protecting you, right, from
Yes,
certain memories,
that's
right?
right.
There's a test that you sent me called the
Yes.
ACEs test.
Yes.
And it's actually a quiz, the ACEs quiz,
Yes. Hmm.
that helps you to be able to identify it. And we'll make sure that wherever you're watching this platform, watching this podcast, or watching this broadcast, that we'll put it in the show notes so that you can
Yes.
click on that link and take that test, right? But tell me
Yes.
why this ACEs quiz is so important for individuals to know exactly what their level of trauma looks like.
Yes. So the ACEs score, the thing about trauma is that it's going to affect your physical and mental health.
Hmm.
It's a soul wound, is what I call it. And
Hmm.
it's a disruption from who we are and how we connect in the world, be it with
Hmm.
our higher power or even with our connection to each other. And so The ACEs score was something that a doctor generally uses to be able to tell how much trauma or what's the level of trauma, because the more trauma you've experienced in your life, the higher your risk is for certain illness factors. So a lot of trauma survivors from childhood have experienced, maybe they've experienced food insecurity or housing insecurity, or they've lost loved ones, caregivers, and children who go through that level of adversity, especially back to back to back, are at higher risks for health conditions. And so this shows up even with our children, right? So I don't know about you, but I try to be the best mom I can be all the time, right? It's my
Mm-hmm.
heart's desire to be a healing and safe space for my child. But I
Mm-hmm.
know that I'm a human being who's had trauma, and sometimes I'm not that great at it. Sometimes I have
Mm-hmm.
my completely human moments, right? So
Mm-hmm.
with the aces can inform us the levels of trauma we've been through. It's not a hard quiz at all. It's very, and some people find that it can be activating a little bit. And so I do encourage anybody who's considering taking the quiz, just check in with yourself. How do you feel in your body? Are you regulated, or are you already agitated? Because if you're already activated and agitated, maybe don't take that quiz quite yet. But if you are settled and you know that no matter what the answer is, you're here for it, you're here to heal that and to work on it, it can be an informative tool. And just because you might be at higher risk for these health conditions on down the road does not mean that that's a doomsday prognosis, right?
Mm-hmm.
You,
Absolutely.
bec- because of healing, I do believe we can reverse the effects. And that's me on
Absolutely.
a personal note. But I do
Mm-hmm.
believe that, again, because I have the ability to experience trauma, I have the ability to heal trauma and therefore reverse its effects that it's taken on my body.
Mm-hmm. It's almost as if what you don't know can hurt you, right? So
That's
I
right.
think being proactive and going into this and saying, okay, if I have a high ACE score, then the likelihood of me experiencing certain health conditions may be higher. And if I have a family history of certain health conditions, that also increases my likelihood of
Yes.
experiencing these things, right? And
Right.
so
Hmm.
it's the beauty of what I love to do as a holistic health practitioner is even
Right.
if you have a family history or even if your ACEs score is high, we can still reverse these things, right?
Yes.
Literally, the body is a machine and it's designed to heal itself. But the
Yes.
objective is to give your body what it needs in order for it to do so.
Resourcing your body, yes.
Exactly. So, ignoring it and pretending that it's not there is not going to help
It's
you.
not conducive to healing. No, no. I mean, you know, there's that Bible verse about what's done in the dark will be brought to light. That has to happen.
Absolutely.
Healing is a
Absolutely.
spontaneous thing. And I don't know about you, but anytime I've ever experienced a physical wound, my body was automatically trying to heal immediately. How do we,
Mhm,
I
immediately.
didn't have to tell it. It just started doing it. And the only time that kind of gets sideways is when it's an infected wound, right?
Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
trauma is the same way. You
Mhm,
have I think that we are so out of touch with our bodies that we forget that it has this magical way that it starts healing itself, and we automatically start healing our trauma, but we lose
mhm,
our way because of infection.
mhm, mhm. That's so
So,
good. That's so good. And it's almost as if once you set the intention that I'm ready to heal in these areas, your body begins to respond automatically
oh,
if you pay attention. So
yeah,
I don't know if you remember me sending you a text one day saying, "Oh my God, I think I have money trauma."
yes, right,
Because my body is over here doing all kinds of things and I'm breathing and
right,
I'm like, what is happening?
right. There's a lot of
But
zeros
be-
I'm putting on this check. Oh, yeah, that's a real thing.
and I was like, okay, we're gonna heal this. This is a part of the
Right.
generational healing of poverty, right?
Yes. Right.
In order to
And
heal from generational poverty, you have to be aware of what's going on with you, where the mistakes were made,
Yeah.
right? And
Right.
what you need to do differently in order to heal in that area. So when
Right.
we talk about the 4 F's, and this is going to be a great transition to becoming
Mhm.
more trauma informed about what's going on in your body, let's talk a little bit about these 4 F's that are happening in your body when you have
Yes.
certain triggers
Mhm. Mhm.
and
Mhm.
you don't
Yep.
know what's happening with you. Let's dig into
Yes.
that.
Yes. So the 4 Fs. So most people are familiar with fight and flight, and
Hmm.
those are the basics, right? But we actually
Hmm.
have fight, flight, freeze, and there's 2 types of freeze, and I'll come back to that. And then there's fawning. So with the
Hmm.
freeze, there's the hyper freeze where it's kind of like deer in the headlights, like I got
Hmm.
caught off guard. I'm shocked. I don't know what to do. And then there's the hypo freeze, which is that I played possum. I laid there, I took it, I whatever I had to do. Fawning, however, some liken it to an internalized freeze.
Hmm.
But fawning, I say, is that being conditioned. It's one of those that they really didn't focus on until they started really focusing on survivors of childhood trauma. And what we've come to understand about fawning is it's a conditioned response to go along with the trauma. So it will have you
Hmm.
participating in your own abuse, in your own pain, and a lot of shame starts to bubble up with people who are tend to lean in fawning.
Hmm.
Fawning looks like the people pleaser. It looks like
Hmm.
the student that has good grades but is terrible at home because they're performative, right?
Hmm.
And so those are the 4: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And those are our 4 responses when we find ourselves in service to survival, as I say, or
Hmm.
triggered and traumatized.
Yes, so good. So good. So this is a moment right here where I always like to teach my take five breathing technique, right?
Yes.
I
Yes, let's do it.
facilitate some small groups, right? With women who I'm teaching about their triggers. And when you're triggered in any way, even by this conversation, we probably should have
Right.
had a trigger warning when we started.
We'll make sure to put it in the title.
Exactly. This is a moment when you can just pause and just
Mhm.
breathe. So, with take five breathing techniques, I like to set my timer for 5 minutes. I
Okay.
like to breathe deeply in as a maybe a 5 to 7 count. So, you're going to take a deep breath in through your nose and you're going to hold it. And then you're going to release it through your mouth 5 to 7 counts. And you're going to do that continually for 5 minutes. For the
Mhm.
sake of time, we're not going to do it for 5 minutes, but
Right.
we are going to take a minute to just breathe. And so I want to give you, the viewer, a moment to process everything that we've just said. And I
Yeah.
want you to take a moment to just listen to your body. I want you to take a moment to listen to what things need to be healed in your life, what generational trauma you're stuck in, what past trauma you're stuck in. And some traumas happen every single day, right?
Yeah.
But we
Yeah.
can't continue to suppress those things. We have to let our
Right.
bodies feel it and we
Mhm.
have to process through it with someone. I love that you said someone that's safe,
Yeah.
not just anybody, because everyone
Right.
is not safe to
That's
help you
right.
process through trauma. This is why we're doing this broadcast, because
Mhm.
more people need to understand about trauma informed care. And we're going to dig into that a little bit more about what it looks like to be trauma informed as a business owner, as a community person. But for the sake of this moment, I want you to just take a minute and just breathe. Ready? Here we go. In through your nose and pause and release.
Mhm.
Let's do it again. In through your nose and pause and release. And one more time. In through your nose, deeper this time, and hold it and release. So it brings your body back to center. It
Yeah.
brings you back to present. Because
Mhm.
sometimes when you're in experiences that are triggering,
Mhm.
when you're having conversations with people who are triggering.
Yes. Yes.
You have to just pause and breathe.
Right.
People always ask me, why are you always taking deep breaths? Be like, you don't want to know.
Right, right. There's a lot of science about the way that breathing that oxygenates the system, and it helps your nervous system really regulate your body and go, "We're safe. We're okay. You heard this thing and it
Absolutely.
was triggering or it was activating, but we can let it go. We can exhale that on out." So I love that.
Absolutely.
It's one of
Absolutely.
my favorite
Absolutely.
things to use for, freezing. So if you are a person
Mhm.
who tends to freeze, hyper freeze or hypo freeze, you
Yeah.
start to restrict your body and your breath. And so breathing helps bring your brain back online and
Yes.
pull you out of that freeze space. So I love
Yes.
that you're already employing, rest in this space. I love that.
Absolutely. I'm telling you, it's so important. I'm like, no matter where you are, you can always take a minute and breathe. You
That's
might not
right.
be able to get somebody on the phone. You
Right.
might not be able to go into tapping because people will start thinking that you're crazy.
Right. I know. It's one of my other favorites is using tapping.
But you can always breathe. And I think that's so,
That's
so,
right.
so important. All right. So now that we've taken a moment to breathe, how do
Yes.
you want to transition and talk about resources and how
Yeah.
we're going to continue this conversation and what is
Right.
next?
Right. So we touched a little bit on about healing generational trauma, and you said
Yeah.
earlier that you wanted to heal it for yourself, but you also saw
Mhm.
your children struggling. And I want to, and you said, if I heal it for me, then I heal it for them. But I want to remind us all that when you heal it for you heal it for your ancestors. Your ancestors
Mhm.
prayed for you, they manifested for you, they thought
Mhm.
of you. And
Mhm.
so when you are doing this work, they knew you were going to show up and you were going to do this work. And as you start healing yourself, and you can almost, even as I say that, just check in with your body right now. And how does that
Mhm.
feel to know that the ancestors are behind you and your
Mhm.
healing journey?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
even if
Mhm.
in this 3D realm, in this reality that we exist in, even if you feel like you don't have a community, there's one in here already and they're cheering you
Mhm.
on, and it's the whole
Mhm.
universe is behind you. And so I want to say that to anybody listening in this space today. Maybe you did get activated earlier, and maybe you did take, maybe you paused this and took the ACEs quiz and you came back. And I just want to
Mhm.
encourage you that doing that first step and gaining awareness around your wounding and your trauma is an act of self-compassion for both you and your whole ancestry. And
Mhm.
when you heal it for yourself and you heal it for the ancestors, it kind of makes it a little impossible for those that come after us to not do the same.
Mhm. Mhm.
So,
But just know that their timeline may not look like we think it should look.
absolutely,
But
absolutely.
healing is taking place. It is
Right.
absolutely
Yes.
taking place, no
I
matter what it looks like.
Yes. And I stole this phrase from another coach in the association. And so if you're listening to this and you're that coach, thank you for this because the phrase is this: I trust in your ability to heal. And
Mhm.
if we do nothing else but trust in each other's ability to heal, that's
Mhm.
such a huge community care act. And
Mhm.
so, no, it's not going to look like how we think it will. It's not going to be in the time we think it should be. It's not going to, we will watch people continue to wound themselves in service to survival because they are
Mhm.
stuck. Their brain is offline. They don't have that capacity.
Mhm.
And every time we don't have to sit there and let that inflict pain on us because we can trust in our ability to heal. We can trust in their ability to heal.
Mhm. Absolutely. 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 This is so, so good.
Yes.
This is so
Yes.
good. Trust in your ability to heal.
It's automatic, right? Like I said earlier,
Mhm.
I've if you've ever scraped your knee or gotten a bruise, your body starts to behave in ways that it says, "Let's heal this," and we can do that down to our soul, and that's something that I talk about in my book is taking the science of healing. We talk about the nervous system. I talk about this thing called IFS, internal family systems, and
Mhm.
bringing all that together in rest, which is I told you we have fight, flight, freeze, and fawn.
Mhm.
And my theory is that with that, we also have rhythm, rise, resolve, and refrain. And
Mhm.
so just a real quick overview of that, if I may. Um,
Mhm.
If you have fight, and its rhythm is the answer to that. So I tell in my book a story about my husband was in this kind of internal fight space. He couldn't figure this thing out. And then he sat down at his keyboard, his piano, and he started playing a song he hadn't thought about in years. And the rhythm
Mhm.
of the music helped his brain get back online. And within seconds, he was able to finish out that project he was working on. And
Mm.
it was funny because I was literally explaining to him the theory in that moment, and he saw, "You'll have to break that down for me later." And then he lived it right in front of me. And it wasn't, he
Mhm.
didn't have to go outside himself to do that. He had it within him to respond to that. And so, so then for flight, we have rise, rise to meet yourself. You're running away from pain. It's our natural instinct and build to avoid pain. So we shift away from it. But when you rise to meet yourself in compassion and courage and curiosity, you face that. And so, so these are important things when you that I really want to remind people. It's within you to heal, and all the tools are there. And my theory helps spell that out a little bit. The next one, uh, uh, fight, flight, freeze, freeze, as my brain froze just now. And it looks like our computer screen might be a little frozen for Chai, but I'll continue on. If you find yourself in a freeze, breath work. Breath work is that resolve. Resolve to take deep breaths, resolve to get back in your body. Freeze is when we've left ourselves. I'm going to continue on here. I see that Chai has been knocked off. I'm sure she's in her community space and the Wi-Fi got interrupted, but we'll continue on. So breath work, taking a deep breath oxygenates the body. It brings your nervous system back online, and it helps you to get to a place where you're not thinking in service to survival, but rather thinking in service to healing, to thriving, and moving forward in life. The last one for fawning, right? We have that one still. So reframe. Fawning often comes with a negative narrative. You deserve this. You did this to yourself. You made these choices again and again. These are your patterns. And so I always sit with clients who I know tend to fawn. And I always let them know that it's the narrative around it is what's fueling this pain to continue. And when you sit down and you start reframing things from a space of compassion, and you courageously do so, and you get curious around, why do I feel shame about this? Why do I feel pain about this? Why is this so hard to talk about? Reframing it. It's perhaps, instead of saying, this is my fault, you can at least say, this was my conditioning. And instead of saying, I deserve this, you can say, this happened. Yes, it did. And I want to make a different choice. And instead of saying, this is my pattern and I'm stuck in it and I can't get out of it, this is my cul de sac of life, per se, you don't have to accept that. You can say, I like to titrate, or I like to circle around before I'm able to see the fullness of this wound and then move forward on out of that cul-de-sac. And so reframing the narrative around your wounding can be an effective tool, and it's part of my theory. So my theory, rest, restorative response system theory. I'm actually going to go ahead and move forward right now and share with everyone my offerings. And when Chai comes back, we will share her offerings as well. But for my offerings, I'm going to go ahead and share with you a couple of things. The first one is starting in a couple of weeks. I'm actually teaching a course on my theory, REST, the restorative response system theory, and that course is actually you can go to my website, which is the sorry, not the, but it's alchemypractitioner.com. And if you go to alchemypractitioner.com, you will see me there, and you can check out REST, but then you can also check out my other offering, which is my certified trauma specialist course. I am certified through the International Association of Trauma Recovery Coaching to teach this course and certify people who, no matter what your career path, no matter if you're an entrepreneur or maybe you work for a company, whatever that looks like for you, you can get certified as a trauma specialist. So then you can take that back to your space. And this actually brings us to one of the inspirations behind why Chai and I got together about this. And that is, there was a story about an individual who'd hired, I believe it was a lawyer to help them through a divorce. And as it goes, the lawyer wasn't very communicative. As a matter of fact, when they were, the communication was unhealthy and caused this individual a lot of pain, a lot of trauma, a lot of shame. And when you have a job where you are people facing, if you are not trauma informed, you may cause more trauma for that individual. And as a community, if we come together and we start looking at each other through the frame of is this a trauma behavior that they're experiencing? Maybe you have an employee who's chronically late to work, and instead of being like they're just a disorganized hot mess, you can look at it as what is the pain, what is the trauma that has them so disassociated from reality that time is hard for them? Or maybe you have an employee who freezes. Maybe they're supposed to do presentations and their brain just freezes and they're not good under pressure. And I would sit back and ask, what is the trauma? What is the trigger? What is it about being under pressure that causes them to freeze? And then how could we meet that? How could we resolve that with them and their bodies? So this is something that I hope today, as this conversation continues, and as you, the listener, or if you're watching this, sit with this and think about, how am I a contributing factor to people's healing journey, or to their trauma journey? And so, Chai, welcome back.
I'm not sure what happened.
No
My
worries.
signal was strong, everything was good, and all of a sudden I just like, okay, is this happening?
This is such a powerful conversation. Not every
Mm,
piece of technology can handle the energy that is in this space right now. So I wanted to let you know, I went
mm,
ahead and I did go over lightly over my offerings, and I talked about
That's perfect.
a
Perfect.
few of those things. But now that you're back, I was shifting the conversation to the space of why employers really would benefit from taking the certified trauma specialist course. So no
Hmm.
matter your career, no matter if you're an entrepreneur, or whatever that looks like for you that you do for a living, um, if you are a people facing business, then
Hmm.
trauma informed is helpful. It's a community care act as well, because you can inflict more trauma, or you can help somebody in their healing journey by how you respond to them. And I gave a few light examples. Say that you have that employee that's late for work, and I would ask, what is the disassociation with time and reality, and how can you as an employer meet them in that space? What's the flight response they're in? Or maybe it's a fight response. Maybe they're fighting against a structure or a system. And how can you as an employer be part of their healing journey and not inflict more trauma with your own frustrations, that can
Hmm.
come up in that space? So those are
Hmm.
a little bit. I did talk a little bit about what inspired this conversation today, being that an individual had hired a lawyer, and the lawyer was actually more traumatizing to them in the process versus healing
Hmm.
for them.
Yep.
And when you're a people facing business, it matters so greatly how we interact with each other, and it can be healing or it can be detrimental. And so,
Hmm.
with that, I'll let you jump back in here.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for keeping the party going. See, this is what I'm
Yes,
talking about. Your riders. You got to have your riders with you. You got to have your
that's
riders with
right.
you. I don't know if you had a chance to also share some of the resources. We wanted to also share with you
I
a
did not
couple of
get that part.
resources in addition to Rest, Pepper's book. We are going to
Right?
also put those in the show notes as well. The Body Keeps
Yes.
the Score. It's an amazing book
Yes.
resource. There's also a workbook that goes along with that. And so you
Yep.
can, again, click the links below or next to this broadcast and get a copy of that. In addition to
Yes.
one that Pepper recommended, which was amazing, called My Grandmother's Hands. I'm actually listening to the audiobook now, and it's been amazing.
Isn't it? Yes. Immerse
It's
yourself in that one.
Oh, yes, I am. I absolutely am. It's so significant in my life because my grandmother was the one who raised me the rest of the way after I lost my mom.
Mm.
So to have her her hands in my life for a very
Mm,
significant amount of time. And now being a grandmother, and I think it's so cute. My grandson, when he goes to sleep, he literally takes my hand and he puts it over his face. I have no idea why he does that, but he likes for my hand literally to be on his
right?
face, which I
Oh,
think is so cute and significant. So I take that as an
yes.
opportunity to pray for him and to
Oh,
speak life
yes.
over him,
Mm,
and so we definitely recommend that as a book resource as well.
yeah.
One of the most amazing things that people keep asking me, now that we're full fledged, moving full time in this healing space, is when are you going to have a retreat?
Yes. When, Shy? When are we doing that?
I'm just saying, I'm like, okay, it's time. It is actually time. And so I'm gonna share my screen with you all. Hopefully you can see it.
Fantastic.
We
Yes.
we will be hosting our very first retreat. If you haven't gotten a copy of The Endurance Ride of Life, I highly recommend it, which is my book resource. It's my personal journey of how I overcame some of the childhood trauma and walked to a place of healing.
Mm,
Um, but the 3-day healing retreat will be in September of this year in Costa Rica. So we are so excited about what God is doing, in the area of healing and life transformation. And so if you are interested in participating, it is a limited time only, limited number of people. We want you to hop in on this
yes.
opportunity like as soon as possible. You can visit myinsideoutlifestyle.com/healing retreats and scroll down, and you'll actually see this 3-day healing retreat in Costa Rica. Just click this link
Yes.
and it'll take you directly to getting your deposit paid. It'll have all the details of when the dates are. Everything that you need will be there. And of
Mhm.
course, if you have questions, you can just shoot us or contact us and we'll answer any questions that you have. And in 2024, this is another exciting thing that Pepper and I have been talking about. And we've got some amazing guests coming to this one. I've already started having conversations with other healers. We're going to be doing healing retreat for healers, right? And so we don't have a date for that one yet, but please join the waiting list and you will be the first to know when that healing retreat for healers is going to happen in 2024. We are so, so excited about how God has navigated us through this healing journey. If you haven't heard it already up until this point, Pepper and I are really passionate about healing. We are really passionate about seeing others live a life of wholeness, living the life that they were preordained to live before the foundation of this world, right? And we
Mm,
realize that many of us, many of us have gone through a lot of experiences in our life, and a lot of people that I talk to on a daily basis feel stuck.
right.
They feel hopeless. They feel like they have to
Yeah,
stay in this place. And we are here to tell you that is not true.
right.
But you must be willing to do the work. You
Mhm.
must be willing to do the work. And we're here to help
Right,
you on this journey. We're here to support you on this journey. You are not alone. And you
right.
got this. You
Right.
got this.
Yes, and I would also say, you're doing the work one way or another. You're doing the work to
Absolutely.
stay in service to survival and in
Yes.
trauma and in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, or you're doing the heavy lifting and cycle breaking of rhythm,
Hmm.
rise, resolve, and reframe. And so
Hmm.
it's your choice, it's your life, you are a free agent, you have autonomy. But if you're going to be doing the work, I don't know about you, but if you're going to be doing the work, I'd want to do the work in this realm of healing and with a community surrounding me that's also like-minded. And I think that's something that I love about what we're doing here, Chai, is that we are starting this conversation that's really a huge conversation. This is just the
Hmm.
first intro to this conversation, but
Hmm.
really helping people see that, like, community care, sometimes we're
Hmm.
incapable of having self-compassion. Sometimes we're incapable of knowing what healthy relationships and boundaries look like. But when you
Hmm.
get in relationship with the Chais and the Peppers of the world, you start to
Hmm.
have healing, restorative conversations that are being had from compassion and understanding. And now, because of your experience and immersion in that space, now you're doing healing work naturally. It's much more natural than
Hmm.
trying to stay in service to survival. So yes,
Absolutely.
yes,
Absolutely. And your body just automatically begins to respond. It literally,
yes.
once you're in the
A
mental
right
space,
now manifestation. Yeah.
your body just automatically starts to do what it needs to do. It is amazing, which is why Pepper gets these random texts from me like, oh my God, oh my God.
I'm like, let it land here. It's all good. I've got you.
So
Yes.
this has been an amazing beginning of the conversation, trauma informed community care. Hey, we started it off, but we would love to invite you to the table
Yes.
to continue this conversation with us. So if you'd
There's
like to
room.
invite, yeah, there is much room at the table.
Let's
If you
bring
would
it.
like to invite either one of us to your podcast, to your webinar, your workshop, we are so open to that. We're also going to be hosting a series of conversations as well. And so if you're interested in joining the conversation, reach out to Pepper and I. You know, of course,
Mhm.
all of our contact information will be in the show notes. Please, please, please do not hesitate. This ship is picking up steam.
Yes, it is.
And we are so, so, so excited about trauma informed community care. Remember where you heard it first, because you're going to
Yes.
begin to hear it everywhere.
Yes.
Pepper, do you have
Yes.
any closing remarks that you just want to leave with our audience? We'll make sure that they get all the information that they need in the show notes.
Yeah, I just want to encourage everybody that no matter where you find yourself today, or in your past, that you are a creative healing being. And sometimes your healing is just in your presence. And I
Mhm.
shouldn't even use the word just, but wherever you go, whatever you do, you have the ability to be a healing presence or a harming presence. And I hope that when you're sitting with yourself, that you are a healing presence for your own self and not contributing to the old cycles, the old narratives. And I so appreciate everyone that tunes in and watches this and gets something from it. And I hope they reach out to us and let us know, like, this thing you shared, like, it changed things for me. So
Yes,
we're here for it. We're ready. We're excited to move forward and make this conversation even more global. And
yes.
thank you so much, Chai, for being that you've actually done the most of the heavy lifting on this part of it. And I just so appreciate that, because I'm like, I'll show up and I can talk. And so thank you for your gifts in this space, as not
Mhm.
as a healer, but also running the technology, and even whenever it was like a little rude to you, and bearing with it
Okay.
anyways. So
It's okay. It's okay. No trauma
yeah,
response either. I had no
that's
trauma.
right. That's right. Yes, because you are regulated. You are here for this. I love it. I love it.
Well, again, thank you all so much for tuning in today. Please remember to share this broadcast with someone who you know will benefit from this, and we'll see you at the table. Have a blessed
Yes.
day.
Thank you.